We are back on our program, and for this part of our event, we are going to hear a short lecture and then to have our critical infrastructure panel. It's my honor, and it's part of a real impressive delegation that we have here from Department of Energy, that a delegation that arrives here not just for this event, but for the CyberWeek, and we are really excited, and honored to have you here and to host you as part of this week. And I want to invite the Chief Information Officer of the U.S. Department of Energy, Mr. Max Everett. Please welcome.
Thank you all. My colleagues won't believe this, but I'm going to be brief. Hit a few things quickly. Some of you are wondering why they have a CIO talking to a group of CISOs. I expect many of you have spent much of your careers cleaning up messes that CIOs like I have created. And I'll make it even worse because I'm a lawyer. Having said that, a lot of my career prior to this has been really focused around implementing IT in places that frankly think about security in high-risk areas. And so this is something I've actually spent a lot of my time in my career on, is thinking about how we implement this. And so I'm going to talk very quickly about two things we're doing at the Department of Energy that really reflect what we're doing across the U.S. government. I'm going to tell you up front, I'm not going to tell you anything that this group of people doesn't know. What I'm doing is sharing this because I want you to know where we're going as a U.S. government, and especially as Department of Energy, because we have a critical role in protecting critical infrastructure in the U.S., and frankly, partnering even with people around the globe on doing that kind of work. And frankly, I share it hopefully as an encouragement to you. If the U.S. government can try and do IT better, no one else has an excuse not to. So just take it with that in mind. So the first thing I want to talk about very quickly is this idea of IT modernization. You've already heard that a couple of times today from the different folks that have talked. This is about moving to cloud, moving to automation, some of the areas like that. And I want to talk very specifically about one that we're really embracing right now, the Department of Energy, and across the government. So we have a thing called the TIC. That stands for the Trusted Internet Connection. So this was something the U.S. government put together over a decade ago in response to all of the various cybersecurity threats we saw with all these different entry points into our enterprise. Now, it was a great idea when it happened. And in fact, it's frankly still a pretty good tool as one layer of defense, right? It was really about aggregating your traffic so you have better visibility. Pretty good idea. The problem was that was put together almost a decade ago. And in the meantime, we've seen cloud, mobility, all of these different things have risen up that have now made that traffic aggregation model a bottleneck. It's slowed down our move to cloud. It causes performance problems for our mobile users, things like that. So we're working on a pilot program at the Department of Energy to move to the next step. Right? And this is also important because, again, you've heard people talk about cloud and some of these other things. So the reality that I think most of us already knew is that the perimeter and that idea of defending the perimeter is no longer enough. Right? That's not really going to provide us the kind of security we need. We've got to start to move our security out to where our data is, out to where our users are, out to where our applications exist. And so that's really what we're moving in this model. I mention this also because the biggest challenge we're looking at in this model is how do we find the right data and use that to protect ourselves. Again, I've been around cybersecurity long enough. I've never met a person in a SOC who said their biggest problem was not enough data, right? That's clearly not our issue. Our issue is knowing what is the most valuable data and how do we use it to protect ourselves. And so that's really the focus of this pilot. And we expect as we go forward, again, this is not a surprise. Most of you in this room have probably already moved in this direction. We're just playing catch up. But it's an important step forward for us. And it's an important step forward for us, frankly, because we've got to be able to move to these kind of things as we address things you guys talked about, like workforce, recruiting. I can't recruit people if I don't have modern systems. If I'm not in the cloud, no one coming out of school is going to want to come work for me on legacy systems and write COBOL. Real hard, but if you know somebody who does that, let me know. We're looking for those folks. So the second thing I really briefly want to talk to you about that we're doing across the U.S. government is really focused around leadership and reporting. That doesn't seem very technical, but I would actually argue it's incredibly critical to everything we do. So when I joined the U.S. government about a year ago and as a CIO, at that time of our 24 sort of largest departments, only half of the CIOs in those departments reported to the head of their department. Now, having spent a few years in private sector, as many of you I think know, that is almost a dinosaur age behind in how we manage IT anywhere else in the world. And yet that's where we stood. So one of my first goals when I walked in the department was to make sure that my reporting reflected what virtually every best practice said should be the case, which is I should be part of the executive team. I should have access to leadership. I should be giving them guidance at the very beginning of every decision we make when it revolves around IT and cybersecurity. And I'm happy to tell you that I was able to make that happen because I was fortunate to have leadership who had that mindset. And I'll tell you that was so important in the U.S. government. I was actually called to testify before Congress specifically about that change and the value to me in how we managed IT and how we managed cybersecurity risk across the Department of Energy. And in the intervening months, 4 other of my colleagues are now also reporting to the head of their agencies. So it's a big change. I mean, that is a monumental change in the federal government. And again, I share it with you because in my private sector practice, you know, I used to go do cyber assessments for companies large and small. And I will tell you what most of you know, which is every mature or maturing company had IT leadership at the executive level. They were reporting to the CEO, to the board. That's where we're all going. And the reason, again, I think you all know is because really no modern business isn't an IT business. I've been fortunate to be around some CEOs of some very large companies. And no matter what sector, the thing that struck me was every one of them described their company as a cyber company, as an IT company. Now, we all know, and this audience probably more than most, that there are a lot of people who are giving lip service to cybersecurity, but they're not really getting there yet. We all know that. We've got a ways to go. And that's the flip side of when I talked about that reporting element. It's great to report up. The problem on the back end is that we've also got to have the accountability and the capabilities to meet that requirement. We've got to talk, you know, and again, I think you heard a number of the panelists talk about it. We've got to be able to talk business. We've got to be able to talk risk management. Those are the kind of things we have to do. You know, I'm happy to tell you, you know, it's unfortunate we're just now playing catch up, but I'm happy to be able to share just very quickly a couple of those things that are moving the U.S. government, because I think that's a reflection of where you're seeing that happen. And again, let's be honest, governments tend to move a little slower. The fact that we've seen that movement there really gives me encouragement that we're going to see it across different sectors. And frankly, it's what's going to give our department credibility as we go work with our colleagues in critical infrastructure, trying to help protect that around the U.S. and even around the world. So thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of the day.